Hey there, everybody. Welcome to our review of This Is Us, Season 5, Episode 13, entitled Brotherly Love. And I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think this is one of the most difficult episodes that This Is Us has put together because it was so easy for them, I think, to have done something in here and just have it not land tonally or just not have it make sense for the characters. This was a very, I think, delicate sort of needle, and they had to sort of thread all this together.
It was a very difficult episode to thread together. I mean, we're going to get more into it, but the performances from both Sterling and Justin were incredible. And the writing for this episode was very spot on. And it was nice to sort of see it go through the different sort of transitions to really get into the meat of it all.
Yeah, I think they did an amazing job of sort of pointing out why Randall is the way that he is, what he has sort of experienced, and even this idea of ghost kingdoms that we'll sort of talk about throughout this video, I think was just a very powerful sort of way to echo out his experience maybe to people who don't know what it's like to be Randall, to be different than your parents, to imagine others who are in your family who are the same race. Like, I think they tackled all of this so beautifully, but also were able to show Randall's flaws and were able to sort of get Kevin and Randall to a place where they could come back together. I was really moved by a lot of this. It was difficult. It was even hard to watch at times because there were some really tough situations that needed to be tackled.
They needed to be tackled. This episode has been a long time coming. We all needed to get here. They needed to get here. And now it actually feels like we can all move forward.
Well, if you guys do enjoy this discussion as we dive right into all of this, be sure to hit that subscribe button. You know, we are here through the rest of the season. I'm sure we will be talking crazy theories, big surprises. Hopefully there's a lot of good stuff still coming around the bend, and we don't want you guys to miss out on any of it.
Also follow us over on Instagram. We're Matt and Jess TV.
Okay, I guess I'll start here by the moment that like legitimately made me choke up in this episode. The Mr. Rogers stuff. And I will admit, I'm not actually a big, like, Mr. Rogers watcher. Like, I was more of a Sesame Street kid growing up, and I kind of went from that straight to, like, Doug and Rugrats and all the Nickelodeon stuff, but
I was a Mr. Dress-Up kind of girl, and a hilarious House of Frightenstein was a little more on the Canadian side of the spectrum.
Yeah, so it's like, I don't think we necessarily have, like, this big emotional attachment to Mr. Rogers, per se, but that scene when Kevin's just off running around, Jack goes with Kevin, and they bring out this Daniel Tiger, this puppet, to have this conversation with Randall. At first, I was just sort of thinking, oh, is this like a dream? Is this a conversation that Randall just wants to have? But that moved me so much because it was sort of honoring, I think, the legacy of Mr. Rogers and really showing what Mr. Rogers would do. But it's also one of those rare moments in Randall's life, like he talked about later on, not really having a lot of people to tell him it's okay to have this ghost kingdom mentality in your head. And like that puppet, it gave him that permission. It moved me so much. I could talk about it all day because it was so emotional.
That's why one of the scenes that really moved me was the very last scene, because when he was having that talk with Kevin about the Ghost Kingdom and sort of that he had imagined that the librarian and, you know, the weatherman were his other family, that even now that he knows, you know, William and Laurel, that he still hadn't given himself permission to imagine that they're his actual parents, that he still felt guilty about it, and that this conversation when he went to sleep that night before he was able to actually imagined his biological parents there with him, that it was okay.
That was I'm just
so good.
I legit just got chills. Like the two just like really amazing scenes. And honestly, I'm not just trying to pour on praise for this episode, but it's like I could have watched that ending scene with Laurel and William there for like another 5 minutes. I got so mad at Jack for coming in on that conversation with the tiger because I was just like, Randall could have gotten so much more out of this puppet telling him that it was okay. And, you know, all sorts of people have that sort of feeling. And it's just like, Jack, you're so perfect in a lot of ways, but no, go away, Jack. Kevin, go cause more mischief. I want to live in this moment.
I also really liked that, you know, we saw in the last episode that he's going to this sort of group where, you know, other people were talking. I think there was one woman who was saying that she just, you know, tried to explain how she felt to her adoptive family, and it ended up causing this huge problem. And it was nice to hear that in Randall's Ghost Kingdom, his adopted family was also there, that it wasn't just this librarian and this weatherman or just William and Laurel now, that they are also there as well. For him, he has all these different families in there to sort of remind Kevin and remind himself that his adoptive family is a family that he truly, truly loves, and that they have been there for him and he's been there for them.
I think what this episode did so beautifully is they had Randall articulating these things to Kevin, which I think was important, but I think they also had Randall articulating these things to a lot of viewers out there, because I could anticipate, you know, people being like, oh, does Randall imagining this family mean that he doesn't want, you know, Rebecca or Jack or the family that he has? And the answer to that is no. He loves them, he cares about them, but he also goes through these experiences, like even at the Mr. Rogers taping, where the assumption's made that he's not a part of this family, and those things, you know, they stick with him, and Jack doesn't really understand that.
Yeah, that's why the whole dialogue with him and Kevin talking about that specifically, where Kevin's kind of like, it sounds like you're kind of ungrateful, that's something that I think there will be viewers out there that watch this and be like, oh, Randall is ungrateful, but that isn't where it is, and that isn't where it landed, and I didn't get that message, but I was glad that it was brought up in dialogue for the people out there that might think that he's being ungrateful and maybe don't understand all the different things that are happening with Randall, because not only, like, that whole thing where he was like, Kevin, like, not only was this a different day for you where I was brought back to the family, I lost my parents that day. Then, you know, I'm a black person being brought into a white family. So now this change is also happening to me. Like, there is a lot of moving parts. It's not just about being adopted. It's also about being adopted into a family of a different race. It is also about your parents no longer being there. Your biological parents are no longer there. There's a lot going on. And him sort of saying, I feel like I'm trapped in this cycle where I just have to be grateful all the time. And I can't feel anything else is misery. I really can't imagine living like that.
No, I can't imagine that. I can't imagine the expectations that were put on him, because you have Kevin sort of saying, oh, you got everything. And so much of this episode for Kevin, especially like that first half of it, is just Kevin not fundamentally getting it. I think all Kevin really got when he made this trip is, okay, you know, I said some horrible things to Randall that I regret dearly. I didn't understand what it was like for him growing up as, you know, a black person within a white household. And so I need to extend an olive branch and say, I'm sorry for things. And I think he did have remorse, obviously, for some of the things that he said and did. But there's a difference between, like, having some remorse and understanding why you should be remorseful and understanding how deep the problem goes. And I think Kevin thought, I can just say an apology, I can just sort of listen to a few things, and then everything will be okay because I'm not a bad person. But it wasn't really about whether or not Kevin was a bad person. It's just sort of about him not understanding the impact of some of the things that he has done.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest problem that's come between these two brothers this whole time, is that Randall didn't communicate what was going on in a way that Kevin then understood. So if he didn't understand that there was a problem and Randall felt like he couldn't communicate it, then this was just going to be a thread throughout their entire relationship. So even in his 40s, Kevin is showing up and apologizing for basically as a blanket to be like, I am sorry for anything that could have ever made you feel whatever.
Yeah.
Randall not accepting that made sense because he's like, you don't even really know what you're apologizing for. But then on the other side, Kevin is like, you're right. I don't understand. So why don't you, educate me? Tell me what it is. Show me more of what I was doing so that when I can learn from this and go forward with a different frame of mind. Because sometimes it's not just about growing up in an environment. You still have to have those conversations to understand, what you're doing.
And it was fine that Kevin was upset and just frustrated at first with a lot of it, because you know what, if he didn't have frustration here and there, then I don't think he would have had the commitment to sort of get past it. But he's fortunate that he has someone like Randall who is able to put forth that effort to educate him and show him, because I think you're getting a more realistic portrayal that way, where I don't feel like Kevin was just giving him lip service after the fact, because we saw the whole gamut of the emotions, and that made sort of the real remorse at the end of all of this so much better. And I think that's why that middle portion where we saw them kind of in those early college years, that was so important, and just sort of pointing out some specific pointed things of Kevin at a time when he should know better, not knowing better, and just doing these little things calling him Carlton that really, really bother and stuck with Randall, and he just did not get it.
Yeah, and I think that it's important that Kevin was able to come to the realization of, what this was all actually about. Because for a long time, and even here, he was saying, I was really jealous of you. You came in as, this person who was adopted, and wasn't also being like a black person who was adopted into a white family. There was a lot more than just you're adopted, where he was saying, it was more about jealousy, that they would shower you with love. And we were kind of like we're here too. But Randall got everything special. And even though Randall is saying, I didn't ask for anything special, Kevin said, it doesn't matter if you didn't ask for it. That's what was happening. So, and that's where I felt it was coming from. Where Randall was able to sort of finally explain that it's not just about that. It's also about his parents knowing that not only is he adopted into, this family, he is adopted into a white family. And that's the other part of this whole family dynamic, that it's his parents dropped the ball on as well. That they didn't really have these conversations with their kids or all together. It was kind of, we are all family, and I get where they're coming from. We are all family. We are all the same, and we are all in here together. But then they are going to go the extra mile for Randall because he is adopted, because he is black in a white family, and that they feel they have to go the extra mile without having the conversation with all the kids.
And that's where it's difficult, because it's you can see, even with Jack making sure Randall had the special seat at the Mr. Rogers taping, you could see, he felt bad for what happened. He wanted to make sure Randall knew that he was loved and cared for. And it's that's great. And it's a great reminder that, Jack and Rebecca, great parents, but you can be great parents and also still not necessarily deliver something that a person like Randall would necessarily need, because they don't really fully understand that either. And it's once again, the writers do a great job of sort of putting all this out there and sort of explaining it to people who just fundamentally don't get it. And I hope that they take something away from us and they have an opportunity, that it's, it's a compelling, wonderful piece of drama, but there's so much more to take away here.
There is. And I mean, what I'm just the most thankful for is that these two brothers they finally understand where the other person was coming from. There was real forgiveness. And now we can sort of move into the next steps, because now I'm kind of like, where is the show going from here? We know that Kevin and Madison have a wedding coming up, but where is it going now? And conflicts are all resolved right now.
It is true. This is sort of putting a bow on these issues that have been here for most of the past year. And like, I'm sure Randall and Kevin will have some sort of conflict still, but they've clearly set up in the future. Like, they are basically BFFs at that point. And, you know, by the way, I love that they did take a little moment at the end here to hear Randall's apology as well. I know that there were people out there who wanted to make sure that Randall acknowledged some of his own faults in that fight with Kevin, and I think he did that, and he explained that, and I kind of did love the, you know, you are a great actor, but you should do more funny stuff. My neighbor's right. Like,
no, it was good that Randall also apologized because he was also in the wrong.
Yeah.
They were both in the wrong, and they both said things.
Yeah.
And I understand that there are other issues going on, but they both said
Yes.
things. So, you know, Randall also had to give an apology, and it was nice that he did. I'm glad that he did.
Yeah, and so now we are in this spot where I guess the wedding is really like the big thing we're sort of building towards. Other than that, we have, you know, Toby, who is still kind of looking for a job and struggling with sort of being the stay-at-home dad figure. We still have the Rebecca and Miguel story that has not been told.
Yeah, we haven't had a lot of Rebecca going on still. So, I mean, yeah, we still have to see sort of the progression of what's going to be going on.
So yeah, this is an interesting episode in that, you know, there's not a lot of side plots. There's really, I mean, almost all of this is just, it's a character piece about two people. It's like Beth is there at the start of the episode. She leaves, and then it's just at the very, very tail end, and she's back, and it's the Uncle Kevin show. And that's sort of it. So there's not as much content in terms of like stories.
But that's fine. This episode needed to be about these brothers and nothing else. It really did need to be about this.
Yeah, so I'm grateful that they did this. I love the way that they told this story. And we really want to hear what you guys have to say about it. Do you think that they covered all the angles appropriately? Do you like sort of how they showed it in these different eras? Did you get just like flooded with emotion by Daniel Tiger talking to Randall like I did? I don't know what it was. I can't stop. I want to go watch it again. Like, let us know in the comments. And if you do enjoy this video, subscribe for more, give us a like, support us further as well. Check those links to the store, our Patreon, and we will see you here next time.